Yo, yo, yo! Welcome to another episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. This is a best of episode. As always, I'm your host, Neil Horowitz. You can find me on Twitter at NJH287. Also on LinkedIn, where I post more content. Connect with me there. The website, as always, is dsmsports.net. And of course, follow along, subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast platform. So we try to do these best ofs about once a quarter, and we haven't done one yet in 2023. So this is the latest edition. We have such a vast catalog, nearly 10 years of doing these podcast interviews, and we try to make sure that we give you some of the best of so that you know which ones to go back to and listen to the full episodes, just give you a taste of some of those that you may have missed or want to hear again, because there's really just so much knowledge, so much insight that stands the test of time. So a quick preview of who you're going to hear from in this best of episode. We're going to start off with Jay Hicks, who talks a lot about sports creative. He has a great background in creative positions in sports, of course. Then after Jay, you're going to hear a little bit of my conversation with Missy Perez. She has spent time with the Phillies, the Lightning. She teaches social media. A great conversation there. Then you'll hear from Paul Lucas. You may know his website and really social media brand, digital brand, UniWatch. Just a really fun chat that was. After Paul, you'll hear from Kendall Freer. She is with Yahoo Sports. Really, really good stuff with Kendall. After Kendall, we'll hear from Stephen Huddy, social media coordinator with the Green Bay Packers. Also spent a lot of time with the Cincinnati Bengals. Lots of good insight there. After Stephen, we'll hear from Brent Gamble. Just a great career in both baseball as well as NASCAR. Just tons of knowledge from Brent. And after Brent, the last one will be Kenny Porton, who has spent time with the NFL, with CBS, with the XFL, is now with the Daily Racing Form as their director of marketing. So as you can tell, a chock-full episode of great interview excerpts to give you a taste so you know what to go back to. So to start off, as I mentioned, the first will be episode 167, which is Jay Hicks. You may have heard his podcast, which is the Sports Creatives Podcast. He has a great catalog there that I recommend checking out. Lots of good conversations that he's had. But in this part of my chat with Jay, you're going to hear a little bit about being thoughtful with creative, not expecting your creative team to sort of be on the creative treadmill. Think of the Kinko's version of just, brief here, more, volume. We also hear about planning for a season when it comes to a creative team. So much goes into it, so you're ready for anything, and also have time to create reactive content in the moments as well. Collaborating with other departments, especially as social media kind of blurs the line between creative production and social and professional production. Just tons of good stuff, and you're going to hear a little bit of it. So listen up to part of my chat with Jay Hicks.
I think the great brands, fortunately just been able to, not to the extent that you have had a number of podcasts. And I think from talking to them, my conversations, and from my personal experience and professional experience is if you think about it, you're just like a doctor. And for a doctor, if a patient came in and asked for a specific drug or asked for a specific treatment without doing a proper patient analysis, that would be medical malpractice, right? Mm-hmm. A doctor would never give you a drug, would never prescribe something without knowing your symptoms. So as creatives, we have to stop and say, who's the audience for this specific project? If this project is successful and it achieves all of its goals, what does that look like to you? The person asking you for the creative. So I think we have to stop, and also that also creates value in and of itself, because you're then figuring out what the problem is so that you can solve it, that you can define it. And then most importantly, it also makes sure the creative doesn't turn into what, a lot of people I call the Kinko's mentality. I need a graphic. Ding, ding, ding. When someone walks in Kinko's, hey, I need, I need a mailer for recruiting. Ding, ding, ding. I need a birthday graphic. Ding, ding, ding. We're just on a treadmill. That puts you on a treadmill. And there's no value in that, right? Yeah. The difference between, we all know, Starbucks charges $4 for something that theoretically you could get at the Quick Trip for 99 cents. You know what I mean? So I think we just always thinking of ourselves as being a resource that is to be valued, and that we're still looking to give value, I think is a good place for us to be. And I think that's really hard right now. And I think it's hard because the demand for social is that people want it, and they want it so quickly. So I think it's important to have these conversations so that we're not just creating endless content without the audience in mind and without knowing what we're specifically trying to achieve.
Oh, this is awesome. We're almost skipping ahead, but I want to keep going down this path. Because we're already there, and it's fascinating to think about and talk about. I can't tell you how many times I've seen an incredible piece of creative, whether it's put out by a college athletics program or a pro team, and it's just, it's a random off day on a Tuesday, and they decide to put out this just fire creative with showcasing their D-line and how many sacks they've had in the season to date or something like that. And it's like, wow, like this is awesome, but this took someone a significant amount of time to produce, and this took someone to put it in the content calendar perhaps, or it was just, hey, we know we're going to do X number of graphics throughout the season, or we want to reach this number of engagements or impressions, and we need this many pieces of creative to do that, and this is and this is how we're going to reverse engineer to those goals, to those objectives. Like, how, when you are thinking about that creative output and knowing that there is it takes time to create awesome things, and you can only do so much in a given day, and tax your team so much. So how do you think about that from a creative leadership perspective, and trying to estimate how much can be produced, and also then what the ultimate goals are, and how that random post on Tuesday comes to be?
That's a question, right? This is a conversation I have nearly weekly with colleagues. I think the first place you have to start off by filling in the things that are known, right? What are the known quantity entities that we know that are going to be coming, right? That whether it's, hey, your athletic department has ESPN type of social awards in April, and that takes up this amount of resources. Mm-hmm. And so, but I think it's starting from there. And then, but really where you need to do is understand what makes your athletic department uniquely different. Like, what is that experience? And I think the reason why, like, a lot of content right now looks the same, it feels the same, is that people sometimes are, and it's not only the creators, a lot of times it's the request that they're getting, hey, they saw USC is doing this.
Yeah.
They saw this
we
school
want
is
that.
doing that. We want that. So then what we can say is, hey, well, what about that is it that you like, right? Now, let's get beyond the fonts or the colors. What is it that we want to achieve? And so I feel like if you can ask how things come down to the organizational goals, whether they're revenue goals, culture goals, brand goals, and getting into that, that's a good thing. And then figuring out how, once you've got those items nailed down, your pillars, for example, were like content pillars that you've established off of your mission and your business objectives, then from there we can get creative with it and figure out different ways to do it. One of the things I will say that I really learned at the news when I worked in the broadcast side is your resources are relatively limited. Mm-hmm. I mean, compared to college athletics, right? Like your average local TV, for example, may put on 5 shows a day, right? Your morning show, which runs several hours depending on the size of it. They might have a midday news show at noon. They might have a 3 or 4 o'clock-esque kind of show, a 5, a 6, and a 10. Mm-hmm. So think about it, right? How many reporters are creating that? So one of the things that it really allows me to do is figure out ways to be creative. How can we do something and repurpose that content several times and shoot it in different kinds of ways to be creative so that we're just not reinventing the wheel, And that's where I believe in diversity of experience and background, because relative to each individual, because you learn and pick up different skill sets by doing different things. You could do that as a side hustle or a personal project. It doesn't mean you have to quit your job today and go work in another industry. But diversity of experience really helps you as a storyteller figure out how to be efficient and how to get all these things done, because we know when I was in the news business, the 10 o'clock show is running whether you have your story ready or not.
Yeah. And let's dive into it. What are the methods, the tips, the tricks? I'm someone who is a relative outsider when it comes to how those creative teams function and get all that output out. I know how to make a creative request and to demand content, but is it around saving templates, saving filters, understanding what filters you typically use to create a certain effect, and just having like this arsenal that you can revisit without having to think twice about it? Or what are the tricks to the trade, so to speak, and whether it's on the video side or the Photoshop side or any other creative outlets.
No, that's really great. I think you hit on it. I think it's definitely, again, we fill in that calendar of things that we know we want to do, right? Let's say it's, you've got different events that you know that you're going to do. Then it's around figure out how you're going to cover some of those things to tell that story. And then I think on some of the things that occur all the time, obviously, like games and events, holidays, birthdays, those are definitely template based. One of the things I think that if teams can do a little bit of training with, like, let's say the SID or the publicist or the social media manager, depending on whether you're talking about college or pro, can you train them up to be decently proficient so that they can make tweaks to the template, right? Because sometimes the picture comes in and so now all of a sudden you have to have a skill that maybe if you don't know anything, now you need help. So I think continuing education is always a great part of that. And then the other thing I think you have to do is really work internally to figure out what the needs are. Like, I think as a creative team, you can't just say, we want to do these projects without talking to all your internal stakeholders, which includes your marketing department, your sales department, your PR, because then what happens is you could literally overwork yourself by figuring out these projects you want, and then like, oh, okay, well, we have this IMG project that we signed a contract on 3 months ago, but since we don't really talk, but it's due tomorrow and we need it because, if we don't do this, we won't get out, we won't be able to, fulfill the execution on it. So I think you really on the strategy side, this is where editorial content and calendar is so huge. And I think every department needs someone who's managing that. What that looks like may vary, right? Because every department's a little different and every pro team's a little different. But I think that, and then once you get to a project, you have to figure out, obviously, what are our resources? Do we have photos? Do we have videos? How can we tell the story? And then what's going to be the best medium to tell the story on? Is this sometimes a really strong photo, edited well, might tell the story?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It might be a short video clip that's edited together. We just have to figure out what resources we have available to us to tell the story. And so I think that's where the strategy, and then, I'm not someone who always believes that you need to create one thing and then push it across all the social platforms. You need to figure out, like, what are we going to do on the specific platforms? Right. So we're not maybe putting a video on an Instagram post that it's not that it's bad, but maybe it doesn't get the engagement in terms of storytelling as a strong photo would in that scenario, but maybe put the video on Twitter.
Very well put, man. A couple directions I definitely want to go in there, both on the collaboration side and on the empowerment side. Having a great conversation here with Jay Hicks, Jay Hicks Studios, great veteran in the sports creative space. I want to hit on that first point first around training your staff as much as possible, and I think I was very much in that role in my career where I was entrusted and empowered and abled enough to produce the quick hit stuff for an Instagram story, for a tweet, but if it was a longer form piece, it was something that was going to go on potentially in the game or on the broadcast, on the video board, whatever, or in an email, it was definitely coming from the official creative team, so to speak. So like how, especially now with the endless demand for content between all the story platforms and TikTok, and how much is it? How much should it be on the social media manager to be that versatile and talented and creative enough to do sort of the day-to-day stuff with the creative team working on the more produced pieces that are, I guess, more significant, more meaningful, and not so much that day-to-day riffraff. Like where are we there?
Well, I mean, again, I think we have to be transparent that all organizations don't have the same resources. Right? Some have a lot more than others. I think, and ideally in a situation, you would like to be able to have training, hopefully if you have student workers, if you're at the college level. Yeah. So then you should have periodic training. That's an opportunity where you could reach out, again, building bridges with your SID staff or your marketing staff and say, hey, we're just having like just some basic training on Photoshop, on maybe it's on cutouts. And so that's an opportunity in your training to invite them into the space, because we're all kind of working in this shared space called social and digital, so that people can have training. And I think on the organizational side, it's also helpful to not just have resources, but remind people of how they can use it. Like when I was at Baylor, Baylor had, every employee had a LinkedIn Learning, which remember used to be lynda.com,
Yeah.
The LinkedIn bot. And so, I think it's reminding, because people forget. And so it's a great way to remind people of the resources that are available to them. So I think that's a huge thing on the staffing side, so that hopefully your SIDs can maybe take some pictures, can get to the point, again, getting back to training. That's another opportunity on the still photo side to work with some of your SIDs, to work on some basic things when you're teaching your students, so that the creative team doesn't have to go to every event. Because if you're having a press conference, a presser for the golf coach or the basketball coach, well, could your SID, or if you have a second, like some schools have a second SID assigned to the bigger revenue sports, could they take a photo? And then you've given them a filter and a Photoshop. And so now, and here's the thing, it speeds it up dramatically, right? Because the creative team might be working on the football ticket designs for the upcoming season to get to the printer, to get to mail out for season ticket holders. So I think it allows us to really be able to do content at a high, an elite level, without straining all of the resources, because I'm a big believer that social and digital is a shared space.
So much good stuff from Jay Hicks. He spent time with Baylor, with the New York Rangers. I talked about earlier about his Sports Creatives podcast. Definitely recommend listening to that. And, of course, listen to the full episode to get more with Jay Hicks in my interview with him. But next up on the Best of Digital and Social Media Sports podcast, you're going to hear a little bit of my chat with Missy Perez. Really enjoyed talking with Missy. She is a wealth of knowledge. Great experience. Still young in her career, but already doing great things. As I mentioned, she has spent time with the Philadelphia Phillies, with Tampa Bay Lightning. She's teaching now around the NIL and social media space. We talked in this part of my chat with her. You're going to hear a little about where social media fits for the Phillies. We also talked a bit, because we were talking in the midst of the pandemic, how they were going about engaging fans during the pandemic. And who they were thinking about speaking to and what their social strategy was. So lots of good, thought-provoking stuff. So listen up for a part of my chat with Missy Perez, episode 168.
It's more on the marketing side, but also kind of a marketing and digital. And it's myself and two of my colleagues, Tim and Megan, predominantly handle all of, our social digital content from a conceptual to a posting standpoint. And then we have only one dedicated digital graphic designer who deserves a lot of love, because she kind of revamped a lot of our style and everything like that, and does such a great job for us, especially given, it's a pretty slim resource to only have one person full-time doing that.
Yeah.
And then from a video perspective, right now we actually are just working with our video services department, but typically we have a video producer full-time who's dedicated to us. Ours, Khalil Smith, I don't know if you know who that is, but he left midway through last season and actually took a job with the San Francisco 49ers and absolutely killed it. I mean, his stuff got so much attention and publicity as well it should, because he's extremely talented. But that role, I think we were in the process of hiring before all this craziness happened. So right now we don't have somebody there, but that's the plan. And then we have an intern, a full-time season intern, which we were just kind of granted halfway through last season. So we're pretty lucky with that as well.
Yeah, that sounds like an interesting setup there. So when it comes to devising the social media strategy and as overall with interactive media, it's a straight line between you up to Mike in the VP role, and you guys work together on setting that course, you and your colleagues across creative and your other folks in it sounds like a lean team that really, you're able to take something of a leadership role when it comes to defining strategy and the content calendar and such.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty lucky, I think, having Mike, because he is, he's such a great boss in terms of really trusting us. And I think, if we believe we're going to push the envelope, we'll run things up the ladder. But for the most part, we have so much autonomy on what we post and content creation and conception. And again, if it's something where we're like, I'm not sure if that's a great idea, we'll make sure that those proper people give us their blessing to post it. But we are very lucky. And I think it's funny, because when I first started, I was so used to, being an intern and having such a rigid, I guess like watching, most of what I was doing or posting or this like that. Not that Mike isn't tuned in or paying attention, because he certainly is, but he's so much more hands off in terms of, kind of letting us go to work, and it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about the great executions you guys did around Joe Girardi, around Bryce Harper, but I'd be remiss. You guys are planning content and strategy. You're executing during the preseason. Spring training is about to be done. You're looking ahead to opening day, and then the world just pauses and everything changes.
Yeah,
so if you can, like, give us a little bit of what it was like. When did you guys have that first meeting or that first correspondence that was like, hey, we're gonna have to look ahead to the next 90 days or longer and realize we might have to execute content and keep fans engaged with no games and no nothing. Like, how does that happen, and what was the process like to start to shift?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been different. That's for sure. I think it's so crazy because we kind of got a taste of it with spring training, but obviously, maybe we were, I don't know, maybe the 14th or 13th. I can't remember exactly what day it was before everything kind of shut down, but it was somewhere like 13 days ahead of opening day. And so we had really ramped up everything, from rolling out a new style and a new look and, just from a content perspective of things we wanted to focus on this year, things we wanted to improve. And actually at that time I had just come back up from Florida for my spring training stint. So essentially Tim, Megan, and myself usually head down for the beginning of spring training, a good 2.5 weeks or so. It's more intensive, right when pitchers and catchers report through the first few games. And then after that, throughout the rest of the spring, each of us take a good, week to 10 days down there, and just sort of the content is less, intensive, I guess, once games start. So one person's down there. So it was actually Tim's turn, I think, when everything shut down. I had just gotten back up maybe a few days prior, and I was in the office, and it was again, it's still so crazy because it's so, nobody really, I think, has an idea of how this is going to play out, or when, sports will return, or when anything will return. But it's just so crazy talking to people now, even thinking back to over a month ago, March, mid-March, when everything did sort of shut down, about how like, we thought we'd still be playing we'd be playing by mid-April. I think the first moratorium or whatever it was on games was until April 14th or something to that effect. So it's so insane, to think that we're not even really close to that yet, probably. But so I think, we met really briefly together on that Friday before, the offices had closed down and have been closed down since, and talked about things that we could do to keep people engaged and keep people thinking about the Phillies and baseball. And obviously then opening day passed, and then our home opener passed. So we kind of, were a little bit special with our content on those days, as if people were going to be paying attention to us typically on those days. So we wanted to sort of provide special content for them. And I think just now it sort of feels like the off season. Obviously it's not because it's the off season, but kind of forced into an off season. But just walking the line and threading the needle between being sensitive, obviously, to what's going on in the world, but making sure we can do our part to kind of lighten the mood and distract people maybe from the more negative things, and keep sports sort of a constant in people's lives, even if they're not happening on the field. So,
and we started talking about this a little bit before we even started recording, and when you guys are looking at the keeping fans engaged right now, who is that audience that you're really thinking of? I mean, you see a lot of teams that are creating content for the families, the kids, maybe the parents that that would take their kids to a game or two for the season. You see the archived content that the probably the good old days of the Phillies and of the 80s and the Mike Schmidt era, and being able to show them old content, and that might be the older fan base. But you have these diehards who are with you through thick and thin, that wake up thinking about Phillies, go to sleep thinking about the Phillies, and that's the team they want to see in their social feed. Then you have the casual fans, might be your Philadelphia sports fan, and you guys want to keep them as engaged with you as much as they are with the Eagles, the Flyers, etc. So who are the fans you're keeping in mind right now? Or are you trying to program for all those various fan verticals, as difficult that is, at the same time? And what's kind of been the approach there, and how you guys judge success?
Yeah, I feel that's always sort of our approach, our goal. I don't think it's, obviously we want the more casual fans to find interest in baseball, because you kind of know the diehard fans are going to eat, sleep, and breathe the Phillies or Philadelphia sports, no matter what happens, or, at the end of the day, they'll always be there, but you don't want to take that for granted either. You want to make sure that those people know that we appreciate every single day, every single piece of content, every single day in the stands, that they're there and they will be there. So you want to obviously kind of want to make the casual fan become that fan, right?
Totally.
So I think that's, always our goal. But from a social digital perspective, I think it's engaging anyone who wants to talk to us. And it's, maybe just a diehard baseball fan, not specifically a Phillies fan, or maybe it's the diehard Phillies fan or the casual Phillies fan or whoever it is. I think, we try and kind of umbrella reach all these different people. But it's obviously tough, and especially now. I think in the industry specifically, people talk about it in different ways. So some people are saying, you need to be very sensitive about what's going on in the world and maybe dial back on the content. And I think at first, when everything shut down, we sort of did. We went dark for a few days and kind of tried to get our hands around the severity of it. But then you realize a lot of people are home and looking at social media and, on their phones, and not, they truly can't be going anywhere or doing much of anything. So
they watched the Tiger King all the way through. They binge watch all those shows they've been sitting on, and it's like,
exactly.
I'm looking for stuff to do now.
They're doing it while scrolling through their social media feeds.
Yeah.
So we need to take advantage of that, I think, also, and be pumping out content and noting that, a lot of bored eyeballs are going to be scrolling through their timeline, and what's going to make them stop on something that the Phillies posted. So I think that's a big part of, engaging our fan base now specifically.
Let's go through, and we have so much more to talk about here with Missy Perez, coordinator interactive media with the Philadelphia Phillies. Having a great chat so far. Have you found any particular types of content, whether it's extremely predictable, like, hey, we replayed when we won the World Series, and obviously that's going to really do well, or you have a replay, a re-air of a classic game and we live tweet it, or hearing from players, lifestyle content, coloring books. Has there been any content that's really stood out as this really killed it, or this really missed, or this was a great idea, or what are kind of some of the lessons and successful initiatives that you've seen in the last few weeks here?
Sure. So I think, there's a lot of simulated games going on and video games, MLB The Show. I know like Major League Baseball has a tournament going on now with a representative from every team playing these games. And I think that's a really cool initiative. I don't know how, I'm not a gamer at all. I mean, in any capacity. So I don't really, that's something I'm really learning kind of along with this. But I think, that's a cool way to sort of show it. I don't know how many people think, what people's stances are on rebroadcast games or watching. I am sort of weird on that, only because I don't I'll never sit through a full 9-inning game of something I've already watched before, whether it be on TV or in person. I just I don't have the attention span for that. But a lot of people do enjoy that content, I've found, and so that's something that we've made a priority as well. And our local RSN has been doing a lot of that as well. So, I mean, that's really cool. I think, there's the cheap engagement, I like to say, but it works a lot of the time in the trend stuff. So that, you can only pick 3, or, those kind of your quarantine house or all those things. I mean, we definitely are guilty of dipping into that as well, because fans do like it, or bingo, or whatever it might be. I've noticed a lot of teams doing those kind of things, which I feel like, throughout the year, maybe they happen a few times, but right now that seems like a huge thing, is getting everyone involved, and then it's tag your friends, and your friends do it and all that sort of thing. So it's so difficult, because it's hard to, I think you can only so much rely on last year's highlights, or, years past highlights and stuff without talking about it. And then you understand that fans are obviously really missing sports, but I think people understand, that this is obviously so out of anyone's control that I don't think that anyone's people can miss things as much as they want, but they understand it's the prudent thing to do, that we're obviously not playing sports right now.
Yeah, there's so much to digest there. I mean, I think to the last point, yes, I think fans realize that, yeah, if there are games to talk about, you prefer to be talking about the games, and we get it. We get it. You don't want, maybe you don't want to see another archived, re-air, but would you rather see Phillies content in your feed, or you can see a picture of, your mom's cat again or something, but right. Along those lines. Right. But yeah, and the other thing too that I think too often us in this space that pay attention to everything, we see a lot of teams doing something similar, whether it is, pick three or pick your favorite combination or whatever it may be, pick your favorite table. And if for your fans, that might be the only time they see it in their feed. Or maybe they see ESPN do it, and then your team, or maybe one of their other local teams. I think we see every team in the league doing it. We're like, well, that's not original anymore. But if it's something fans enjoy, and it's something that, and another thing is your fans are not looking at necessarily the Twitter list for all of MLB or all of XYZ league, so it might be the only time they see it or come across it. And so I think we have to. One, always take that into account, that imitation does not mean fans are seeing all the other teams doing it because we pay attention to it. And then another thing is that if fans enjoy it, if they engage with it, that you can tell they're having fun with it, then why resist?
I totally agree with that, and I think I lose sight of that a lot. Like, our fan base, I mean, for the most part, are probably really ingrained in what we're doing and what other Philadelphia sports teams are doing, but I always have a pulse, of course, on all 29 other baseball teams and what at MLB is doing and all that, along with every other league out there. So I feel like I think, I've seen this a million times, but you're right. I mean, a lot of times it is different because it's a totally different demographic and fan base that you're reaching, or people that are seeing what you're putting out. So that's a really good point. And
what's the communication like with your counterparts at other teams in Philly, with other MLB teams, with the MLB league itself, with the RSNs? Are you guys on like weekly calls? Are you collaborating a lot? Are you reaching out to people when you see a good idea? Like, how are you learning from each other?
Yeah, I mean, from just a normal, I guess, not quarantine standpoint, I personally think that from our department, from our organization, we have a really great relationship with, folks at other teams in the city. I have so many friends, who work at different teams across MLB and group texts that we talk about all the time. Even if it's now and we're kind of figuring things out or deciding that, if it's on Slack or texting or whatever it is. So we are kind of always in constant communication with, our counterparts at other teams, our counterparts at other leagues, and within the city and all that. So I'd say, we do a pretty good job with that in general and sort of work together. I think it's interesting because it's such a unique job and position to be in, and it's cool to hear people who understand what you're doing from either the rigor of a baseball schedule, so somebody who works for another MLB team, or from a standpoint of the market in Philadelphia and working in sports and that, so you deal with work with the people from the Eagles and the Sixers and the Flyers and all that. So it's a lot to learn. I think, making those relationships is super important because you learn so much from those people.
Awesome speaking with Missy. Love continuing to follow her career and all the great things that she's doing. So listen to that full episode. Highly recommend it. Next up on the Best of Digital Social Media Sports podcast, this was a really fun interview with Paul Lucas, who is the founder and writer for UniWatch, all about the community and social and news around uniforms, of course, with UniWatch. And in this part of my chat, you're going to hear about developing his community and sort of the interest around uniforms. Also, how he takes in the social media commentary when there are new unis or changes to uniforms introduced, and how he tries to take it in but also not let it color necessarily his opinion. We also talk a little bit about how teams go about hyping their uniforms with various promo videos and social strategy. Just tons of good stuff in this interview. So listen up for a little bit of my chat with Paul Lucas of UniWatch. If social media doesn't like it, then therefore it is an objectively bad uniform. Whereas,
well, I don't know. I push back against that.
That's what I'm curious.
Social media says something that doesn't necessarily mean it's the case. And teams are going to do what they want to do for the most part. I mean, the Los Angeles Rams came out with some logos a couple of weeks ago. Everybody, apparently, the party line or the prevailing thought is that the majority of social media didn't care for it. And people were asking me, like, so are they going to change it? Are they going to go back? Are they going to take it back? And, well, no, it's too late for that. They have like millions of dollars invested in merchandise that's already in the pipeline, with these logos on them. And if people decided that they sucked, well, the Rams can change in 5 years, I guess, because that's the minimum time frame in the NFL for changing your uniforms. But As far as the other thing you mentioned about the build-up, I do hear that a lot from people that, like after a uniform unveiling, like, oh, there were like people will say to me, usually on Twitter, like there was so much hype, like, oh, they didn't even make that big a change, like all this hype just for that. And I mean, there's a reason they call it hype. Hype almost by definition promises more than it can deliver. I try to really not pay attention to any of that build up, that sort of drum roll of anticipation that teams build up. And I mean, there are even videos, like uniform unveiling videos, that are called hype videos, which, again, by definition, and, the way those videos are edited and the music they play, like, what does that have to do with how it's going to look on the field? Like, it has nothing to do with any of it. Like, I just care about the designs. I try not to worry about, the hype. Is the hype silly? Is it like too much? Is it like, does it make you roll your eyes sometimes? Like, yeah. But I mean, to me, that's almost like a given. Like, of course the teams are going to oversell it. Of course the teams are going to.
It's marketing.
Yeah, but I just try to ignore that. And then, sometimes people say, like, oh, we knew they were going to do new uniforms, but the change was so small. Like, why did they even bother?
Yeah.
And I think that's a misguided notion, that, like, because sometimes a small change can be a really good change. And I personally don't care whether a uniform change is big or small or like modern or retro or whatever. I just care whether it's good or bad. And sometimes, like, tinkering with small details can make a big difference. Sometimes a little tweak goes a long way. And so, the Cleveland Browns basically have gone back. They hit like Command Z on their keyboard and said, those things we wore the last 5 years, forget that. We're going back to what we wore before that. And everyone's saying, well, this isn't new. It's just old. It's like what they wore before. And yeah, but what they wore before was actually like not bad at all. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
And so they've, you could say they moved forward by going backwards. And similarly, some teams can make just a small change, and that's it can be a good change. I think people's expectations, and this seems to be like a social media phenomenon and maybe a digital culture phenomenon, where there's that sort of short attention span and the need for constant stimulation. Mm-hmm. Like, if the itch isn't, like, it's not just that you have to scratch the itch, you have to like scratch it till it bleeds or something, like it has to be a really intense bit of stimulation, which means like a really crazy uniform change or a really radical makeover or whatever, and which is great if it happens and if it's done well, nothing wrong with that. But sometimes that's not how it happens. Sometimes it's a small change or a minor tinkering or going back to something that from your earlier history and visual heritage that worked better. And it's interesting how some people are sort of built up and primed for, again, this like really big jolt. And sometimes it's not a big jolt. Sometimes it's just a small thing, and that's okay if it's good.
Yeah.
Like it's, and not okay if it's bad. But again, I'm more interested in the quality of the design change than the quantity of it, if that makes sense. Like how radical or big or significant seeming, just in terms of how different it is. I just care whether it's good.
I can totally relate to the what's old is new again. As a Padres fan, I know we got the yellow and brown coming back, which I don't mind at all. I know it's been getting some positive feedback for the most part from fans. So I'm curious too how like that instant feedback does affect your own objective analysis of a uniform. You're like, let's take for example the recent LA Chargers uniform release, and when that comes out, do you intentionally almost like don't pay attention to the general public noise and be able to look at it objectively? Or take me through the process for Paul Lucas. A new uniform comes out. What do you look for? What do you try to do? And then what's your day? What's your 24 hours like as that comes out?
It really varies. You mentioned the Padres, for example. Now, when they came out with their new uniforms last November, I was shown those in advance. I actually flew out to San Diego, and I was there for the unveiling, which I don't do very often, but I was able to do it for that particular unveiling. And so I knew ahead of time what that was going to look like. I had actually already written the piece that I ended up publishing on my blog about those new uniforms. And so my opinions were, in that case, like, in situations like that, which I would say happens maybe a third to a half of the time I get to see either through official channels or through leaks. I get to see what the team is doing in advance. So in those instances, certainly I'm not affected by what people think because I see it before the rest of the people do. But in other instances, and you mentioned the Chargers, I had not seen the Chargers' new design in advance. I will say this: the Chargers are a team. I think you could legitimately say there has never really been a bad uniform in Chargers history, and so I wasn't too worried, either about what they were going to be doing or what people were going to think of it. I mean, that's a team that has, in general, I mean, they've always had lightning bolts on the helmet. They've always had lightning bolts on their shoulders. Mm-hmm. They've almost always had lightning bolts on the pants. And it's really just a question of, do they have powder blue or royal blue? Do they have a white helmet or a blue helmet? Yeah. Do they have yellow pants in the mix or not? You know what I mean? It's not like they're all variations on the same theme, and the theme is a good one, and it stood up, it stood the test of time. And so I wasn't too worried about them, and I was sure everyone was going to like it, and pretty much everybody did. In other situations, I mean, you can't avoid seeing and hearing what people say. I've got a tab open for my Twitter mentions, and so I see people responding, when I tweet, like, here are the Browns' new uniforms, or whatever it might be. And so I do see what people think, but I wouldn't say it has no effect on me, because I don't think it's possible to not process and have for that to have some impact on a writer. Mm-hmm. But I will say I try as much as possible not to let it influence me, or not to let it affect what I end up writing. I'm always interested to know what people think. Like, it's interesting to see how things are received. That, like, not in the sense that it affects my own opinion, but it's just interesting to see where fans heads are at. But I try to just be honest in terms of my own responses to what I see. And sometimes people will say to me, like, that uniform you hate, look at Twitter. Everyone loves it.
Wow.
And or whatever, sometimes the other way around. That thing you love, everyone hates it. And I don't know what to tell those people. And I'll say, like, I'm not sure what to tell you. Like, should I change my opinion, like, to match whatever? Like, should I lie? Should I lie and not say what I think? Or, for that matter, like, if you just want to go with what everyone on Twitter thinks, then why do you even need to read what I think to begin with? And I put that as a hypothetical or a rhetorical question.
Because Twitter is always accurate,
Of course, I know the answer to a degree. People like to feel validated and reinforced in their own opinions. They like to see that the quote unquote expert, which for lack of a better term is the role I fulfill here. They like to see that their opinion lines up with that of the so-called expert. And if it doesn't, well then, they seek other validation, like, well, you may not disagree with me, but everyone on Twitter does, so you must be wrong, or whatever. Yeah. And I get that. It's like a perfectly human response. I've probably engaged in it myself in situations where I think something, and in some other field or discipline or whatever, whether it's about food or movies or whatever it might be, where my own opinion matches up more with the popular opinion and critical opinion. So I get it, but I don't know what people want from me exactly in those situations. like I think what I think. I believe what I believe. The main thing I just try to do is be honest, and I think as a critic and as a journalist, that's my primary obligation, and that's what I try to do.
Last question for you, Paul, then we'll get to some quick-hitting questions with our third jersey segment to close it out. How has social media affected what you do with UniWatch? Like, do you think of it as a place to interact? Do you try to share just almost like a tease there, and so you can drive people back to the site? Or how do you best use social for UniWatch, as a brand and as a business, frankly, as well?
I mean, in a lot of ways, it's become sort of an inbox. Like, I used to get, when we talked earlier about how readers will be my eyes and ears, and they'll see things and let me know about them and contribute them. That used to all happen via email. Now it increasingly happens on Twitter. I mean, I still get emails coming in, but a lot of people tweet things at me now, and so that's certainly a change. Or to have this sort of alternative or second kind of inbox. Also, it's a good place to have certain dialogue with readers and fans. Yeah. And yes, of course, I can promote my work. I can promote some of the merchandise that we sell. I can, just today, as we're talking, I'm not sure when this is going to air on your podcast, but we're talking on May 1st. I have a monthly UniWatch pin series, these little lapel-style pins. And so it's the first day of May, so we launched the May design today. And, of course, I've been tweeting the hell out of that and saying, here's our the Pin Club release. And so Twitter is very good for that. But I don't think of social media per se as like a separate space. Like I try, I interact with my readers by email, on Twitter, in the comments section of my own website, as much as possible, and within like the 280 character limitations of Twitter, I try to keep mostly the same voice in all of those interactions, and just be thankful for people who send me worthwhile and valuable communications, and try not to be too harsh on the people who send less valuable communications, because there's I guess that's one difference of Twitter, is that the barrier or the bar that people seem to feel, like the sort of psychosocial or socio, I'm not sure what the term I'm looking for is, psychological bar for saying something really stupid, unfortunately, seems lower on Twitter. And so that's another signal to noise issue there sometimes. Doesn't bring out the best in everybody. Sometimes it doesn't bring out the best in me. But that it's the nature of the beast that I guess we all have to, constantly figure out how to mediate and how to best live within that space.
Such a fun chat with Paul. Again, I recommend checking out UniWatch, and of course, listening to that full episode 169, for the full interview with Paul Lucas of UniWatch. Next up on the Best of Digital Social Media Sports podcast, you're going to hear a bit of my chat with Kendall Freer. Man, did I enjoy this interview. I have been a fanboy of Yahoo Sports Social for a while, and being able to chat with Kendall, you really hear about what goes into it. We also, in this part of my chat, though, you're going to hear from Kendall about her time with NFL Network and how she went about making their shows, their live programming, social and interactive, which was a newer thing, something that she had to sort of introduce and socialize and integrate. We also talk a little bit about Yahoo Sports strategy, how they seek to stand out, and their unique voice and personality on social. Just cannot recommend this one enough. This was a bit of my chat with Kendall Freer. So listen up, Kendall Freer of Yahoo Sports.
Yeah, for the longest time, we didn't really worry about Snapchat, but then you're right, it kind of like popped on the scene, and that's where everybody was posting everything, from teams to players. So we actually, probably about a year into me being there, we made it like we had a workday flow, right? You come in, you check in, you get settled in, whatever. And then as soon as you sit down, you start going through everything. So you hit up Twitter and see what's happening there. You hit up Instagram, you see what's happening there. And then we finally incorporated, all right, you need to finally get on Snapchat and just start going through and seeing if there's anything there as well. So yeah, we had to kind of adapt to that kind of stuff, and then it's a matter of, okay, how do we bring this stuff in and then get it onto your television, right? So we had to come up with different processes of bringing the videos in, and every platform has a different back end to where it's like, oh, you can't bring this in, but on Twitter you can bring in the video, so it's like you got to work with all these different things. And then obviously, like, you got to somehow get it from your phone to your laptop into the network system, so then the producers can grab it and then put it onto your TV. It's this, so it was a lot of learning. It was a learning process along the way, but eventually we got it down, and we started using it a lot more for bigger events, like Combine and Super Bowl and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, you just gotta adapt along the way.
I think with a lot of the stuff that you guys did at Total Access and just NFL Network overall, there's a lot of, I guess obvious ways you can incorporate social media, like a big news story drops and you can get opinions from players or, coaches or health officials, whatever it may be. Someone retires or you can get their former teammates talking about them and shouting them out. So there's some ways where it's like, okay, this is an obvious way to incorporate social or into the show, into the program. But is there any, is there some sort of futuristic or something down the line where is there some way to nail social media and TV kind of combined, or live social on TV? Like, is there something that we're eventually going to arrive at and be like, that's what we should have been doing all along? Or is it just going to be kind of a bit more piecemeal? Like, we're going to have our programming and then social is going to, pop in when it can add some value.
Well, I mean, I feel like this pandemic has really shown us that you can do a lot of stuff online, right? And I don't think TV will ever go away. And I don't foresee there just being a straight, network television show that is just all social media. It's going to be, how can you incorporate what's happening on social media into this TV show? I mean, obviously there's TV shows that are on social media. I know NFL has, I don't know what they call it now, but when I was there, it was called like The Blitz. And it's just a full 30-minute TV show that's on Twitter. So I don't know if you'll be able to, kind of flip-flop that and be able to do it on network, but I definitely think that producers are finally realizing the power of social media. And because when I first got to NFL Network, it was kind of like pulling teeth to get anything social into a show, because they were just so set in their ways. And now it's like, okay, like, clearly stuff is breaking on social media that's getting out before we get it out, so you have to incorporate that somehow. So yeah, I mean, I think people are finally realizing the importance of it, and you'll start seeing more of it in shows, but I don't think you'll see just a full-blown show that's just all social media. I think it's just incorporating it more.
Like, what's trending is not going to be a full 30-minute program.
No, because like, why would I go to a network? Why would I just go to ESPN, and watch what's trending on Twitter when I can just go to Twitter and see what's trending on my own? You know what I mean? It's just I think it's going to be a matter of social producers and show producers realizing that you can do a lot of calls to action on Twitter and social media, and incorporating that into your show, whether that be a segment with, Shannon Sharp wants to do a segment and he needs Twitter questions or whatever, I think it's you got to just realize, like, you can do more of that kind of stuff and incorporate your Twitter followers and your social account followers into your show that way.
Yeah. And I think, there's ways it's obviously penetrate as well, whether it's a quick pop in, like a live video with someone that's watching, or even polling in UGC is another element also. I do want to shift briefly to just, and then I want to get to Yahoo, of course, as well. But with NFL, like, when we look at the, the outward facing social media, are you guys putting out content for these shows, for these, social channels? What kind of was the brand, the voice, the goal? Because I think especially looking at what we'll get to in a moment with Yahoo and the very distinct brand and voice that you guys have done a tremendous job putting out there and having fun with. Was there an intentionality with the NFL, or was it very much, protect the shield and put some fun stuff out there?
Well, it's definitely protect the shields. There's a lot of stuff that I would have liked to do more, but you have to keep in mind who your bosses are, and technically your bosses at NFL Network are obviously Roger Goodell as well as all of the owners of the team. So you can only push it so far. But yeah, like, when I first got there, the social accounts were active, but they didn't really know what they were doing with them. So the total access accounts, kind of like what we did, because honestly, like, the accounts came in weren't our main priority. Obviously the shows were our main priority, right? So the accounts, me and another guy, decided we were going to start taking those over and trying to do something with them. So basically what we did is the Total Access one, we kind of just kept it your newsy, your ESPN Sports Center, like, just the topics of the day that our guests and our panel were talking about. As well as if there were any hot takes, like sometimes some of the guys go on there and they'd say, I think the Raiders are going to go undefeated. And it's like, okay, that's going to blow up on socials because that's clearly not going to happen.
I love hearing that.
I'm a Raiders fan too, so I love hearing that. But, stuff like that is where you're like, okay, yeah, we're going to put that on social and let him get roasted for a minute, And so the Total Access one, we kind of kept it just with like the segments. And if we had guests and stuff, we'd post that stuff. The game day morning one, we kind of had more fun with. I actually, I would be on set with them. It's a 4-hour show every Sunday morning from 6 to 10 a.m. Pacific. So I would sit on set with them from 6 to 10 and do a lot of behind the scenes stuff because we had just giant names on that show. So that's the kind of stuff that people want to see. And they don't want to just see those names, but they want to see like what goes into how is a TV show actually made, what happens during the commercial breaks and, what is the guest that they have on doing while these guys are over here doing this, so it's stuff like that. So, and then obviously they had hot takes and stuff as well. So I would clip that off and post it. But
it sounds like you were pretty empowered and had the trust that, Kendall's going to put out there, we can trust her to put out there stuff that's not going to, reflect poorly on us or the talents or put them in compromising situations. Like, so you had a pretty good amount of autonomy, it sounded like.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there were times when, I remember we had Denzel Washington as our guest. I can't even remember why he was on. It felt really random. But he was on, and that's a giant name. And I remember like the head of the network sent out an email and was like, there are only 2 people allowed to take pictures of Denzel when he's on campus, and it's Kendall and then our photographer. And I got that email and I was like, oh my God, I feel so honored right now. I'm like, this is so much power. But yeah, so yeah, it was a very cool. Sundays were actually my favorite. I had to be there at 4:00 in the morning, and I was exhausted. But it was actually my favorite day of the week to work because those guys were so much fun, and everybody on set. I mean, from the host to the cameraman to the producers in the control room, like everybody was just so cool. It was like one big family, and yeah, they definitely just kind of let me fly and do whatever I wanted with it, and I guess I did a good job because I didn't get fired.
Kendall, like what were you supposed to be doing during the games? Because obviously, really, people do people will turn on NFL Network during games, but generally you want them watching the games live.
Right.
But so, what was your mandate? What were your goals during the games, or was that the time when you guys were thinking about the post game stuff, or trying to repost or retweet what some of the talent we're posting?
So during games, because there's a lot of social media handles at NFL, right? Yeah. So there's NFL, there's Checkdown, there's all the show handles, there's NFL Network, there's, you name it, there's the throwback one now, right? So there's so many. So our primary thing while the games were happening wasn't so much like, let's give our 2 cents on, on each play or replay or whatever. Like we would retweet the NFL accounts or put a little spin on our own of some of the good plays. But one of the things I tried to do towards the end of me being there was this thing called Break the Internet, which was basically if there was a play that just it just blew up the internet, right? We would do this thing where we would I would take not every single one, but the majority of the comments, the good ones with the good, social handles that are appropriate. And I would put them all into, I would just take screenshots of every single one and put them into this folder. And then we would put them over the play and have them kind of scroll on the side. Yeah. And then we had this, we had our creative team do this whole it was like ice breaking or like glass breaking, and it was like break the internet, and it would be the play, and then it would just show the number of people that were talking about it, and at the bottom it had a counter for like the number of mentions that one play ended up getting in, you know, a specific period of time. So like that's what I was kind of trying to do while games were going on. We also were doing this thing called the Vantage Point, which was we would go online during big plays and we'd find fan footage of the play happening from different angles in the stadiums. And then we would send that to our edit bays, and they would put it together and with actual footage from the game alongside the fan stuff. So that's kind of what we were doing during games, because we felt like the NFL accounts had everything handled, you know, like, so that's kind of what we were doing during the games.
That's great. Those are like a couple of just examples there that you see a lot more now. You see a lot of, whether it's like college football hype videos that incorporate tweets, and you know, same with pros as well, and also incorporating the fan vantage point. Also, that's cool. It's kind of ahead of its time, and now you're seeing a lot more. And you were doing it way back when, or somewhat way back.
Yeah, a couple years ago.
That's like 2 decades in social media time. So.
Oh, tell me about it. I feel like I've been in this for years now, and it's only been hasn't even been 4. So.
Well, let's talk about moving over to Yahoo, and you know, especially. Look, just one, they obviously they have their NFL deal for mobile viewing, but you know, obviously not there's not a single live sport that they are trying to rally everything around. They're covering a lot of sports.
Yeah,
you guys have and you guys are trying to find a way to stand out. You know, whether it's news breaking or having personalities or having a unique point of view. So I guess tell me what the kind of the brand and how did Yahoo and how does Yahoo Sports, you know, kind of seek to find its unique niche in the greater sports industry and give fans like me a reason to follow along and read their content and consume their content?
Yeah. So prior to me getting there, all of our social accounts were kind of just like article dumping grounds. So when they started the team, they realized that they needed to kind of keep up with what was going on social. So they needed to bring in people who had a voice, who obviously knew sports and knew social. So yeah, it's been interesting. Primarily, I would say a lot of our mentions are Yahoo still exists, which is at first it was like, oh, you know, I'd get all like fired up about it and be like, yeah, of course we still exist, you know. But now it's like you just let that kind of roll off your back. But yeah, so when I first came on, they didn't really have a voice, so we were kind of, you know, probably for the first year or so, we've still been kind of maneuvering how we want our voice to be, because like you said, we don't have access to all of the athletes that ESPN or Bleacher Report does. We don't have access to all the highlights that those channels have. You know, we do have this stuff on our app with the NFL, but we have a very strict contract where we can't use any of their highlights. NBA is a lot more open and willing to work with us on stuff like that. And then obviously, you know, college football and baseball and all that kind of stuff we're good with. But yeah, at first it was very difficult to kind of figure out how we want to enter this sports social media world, right? Because we're brand new. We're definitely not ESPN. We're definitely not Bleacher Report. We still have the people who didn't know we existed. So it was kind of like, let's just try out as much as possible and see what sticks. And so, you know, we tried out the let's be super weird, and some of it stuck and some of it didn't. Then we've tried out the, you know, like maybe let's just be straight newsy, and, you know, nobody really wants to come just for straight news. They want the fun stuff as well. So it's been a lot of trying stuff, seeing what works, what doesn't, and then using bits and pieces from each thing and kind of molding it together to create our voice. So now I think we're kind of we're still trying to figure out. We're a very small team. We are, how many are we? I think we're only 6 people, 6 editors.
Wow.
Yeah, and we've got one on the East Coast in New York, and then everybody else is here in LA. And we all have our own side projects and stuff that we're wanting to do as well. So it's definitely, and obviously everybody has their own copywriting style, and that's another thing is like we have some people that are more editorial, and then there's some that are more goofy and and weird. And it's how are we going to blend all of these different people and different styles together to come up with our voice. So we've kind of figured out a way. The people who are more editorial will keep you if you guys want to do more of the like breaking news and stuff like that. And then the guys who are weirder and memey and stuff like that, will kind of let you do this kind of stuff. So, but I think we're finally figuring out how to jump on the sports scene. At least I hope. I'm glad that you're a fanboy because we, like I said, we still get the whole Yahoo exists.
If I were to ask, I think back, and I think ESPN. I feel like you look at some of their marketing material even these days, their commercials, that they're really leaning into. We're the newsbreakers. We have Chef. We have now they have Wojnarowski, who was obviously previously at Yahoo, and it was Yahoo that you guys used to have Woj. You guys used to have, or you had Charles Robinson break investigative stories, and you had Pat Forty, who and now Dan Wetzel. I know Pat Forty's now at SI, and so if I were to ask you, so if let's say ESPN wants you to say, oh, they're the newsbreakers. If I were to ask you, what do you want people to think about or say when we go? What do you think about Yahoo Sports?
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, I would hope that people would realize and would think of us as having just like a fun take on stuff as well as being storytellers. One thing that I've been trying to do more is tell like these weird and wild stories that are happening in sports that people may not know about. So we're kind of diving into that, and I think that's definitely like, there's only so many people that can break the news, right? Like ESPN breaks the news, Bleacher Report breaks the news, SI breaks the news. Like we're all breaking the news. We're all just like, how can you differentiate yourself from those guys? So ours is kind of like, let's take a weird and kind of fun take on some stuff. So I hope that people will realize that that's kind of what we're trying to do. I know we're still working on it. But hopefully that they can see that that's the angle that we're trying to head towards.
Phenomenal chatting with Kendall. Listen to that full episode. That is episode 171. If you're scrolling back through the archives, just so much good stuff. And continue to enjoy seeing what she and the team are doing at Yahoo Sports. Next up on the Best of Social Media Sports podcast, you're going to hear from Stephen Huddy. He is social media coordinator with the Green Bay Packers. Prior to that, he was with the Cincinnati Bengals. So he has a lot of great experience in the NFL, in social, in video. We talk a bit about strategy when the team is losing, which he endured a little bit with the Bengals. He also endured some of the good times there. And what that means for strategy was sort of taking chances, being able to be a little bit more outside the box when the team is losing. We also talk a little about video production, how that fits in with social. As well as what it was like to join the Packers and learn the ropes with them going from the Bengals to the Packers. So lots of good stuff, and you're going to hear a little bit of it in this excerpt of my interview with Stephen Huddy. Listen up.
I'm sure other people found out in other ways as well, but I just remember I saw a tweet from one of our players. It was Pecco, who put out, I think it was a GoFundMe or something along those lines, talking about Devin Still and his daughter and raising awareness about that situation. And I kind of passed the link on to some people internally, and just with the caveat, like, hey, this is happening. I'm not sure how we can be involved with this. And it never really was meant to be like, oh, hey, let's make this a big PR campaign or get it out there to the public. It was more so the Bengals are a very family-oriented organization. It's run like a family-owned business. And the ownerships are very involved in day-to-day. And I would meet with ownership routinely. Wow. And they had a meeting and they decided on the jersey sales, and it all kind of just took off from there. And I'm also thankful for the organization for kind of given me the responsibilities I had, as a younger professional, a lot of what we were doing, it didn't have to be run past anybody. It was, we trust you to kind of help guide the narrative. And we're obviously internally, we would all speak and make sure we're on the same page, but we had a lot of leeway in how we wanted to approach it and present our plans.
And that's really cool to hear. We talk about trying to convey emotion and humanize players and tell these significant stories, and you guys were doing it, early on there and did a great job, and it still resonates today, no doubt. And I guess how do you guys, especially being a lean team, you look at effort versus reward, what was it like kind of balancing those storytelling, humanizing features and sort of more behind the scenes stuff with the day-to-day football stuff? Like, how much should we spend on highlights and hype videos versus interviews and feature stories and again that more off the field type aspect?
Well, I think it's also important to note here, the Bengals are very football first, and that's something that they share with the Packers. That's something that I've been told is, if a decision is going to be made, it's going to be football centric.
Mm-hmm.
So this keeping that in mind, our fans, at the end of the day, it's good to offer the behind the scenes, but they also, you got to think, why are they following us? Well, they're going to want to know stats. They're going to want to know outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So you just need to make sure that you're offering the expectations first, and then building on top of that for the added stuff that can be different from maybe what other teams are doing.
Makes sense. And you guys had no shortage of highlight makers there over the years, no doubt. And I know if people think of, the Bengals having their struggles on the field with, having tough seasons here and there. What was it like when the team wasn't performing as well and, trying to keep up the energy of the fans? And I even mentioned this kind of in prepping in my notes for this interview of, you kind of always have those super fans that will stick with you. And I guess, what was the experience like from a social media strategy perspective when the team was playing well versus when the team wasn't playing as well, and how that affected your guys' your strategy and day to day?
Well, I was fortunate enough that I've been a part of good teams. This past year with the Packers was a fantastic team.
Yeah.
And the 2015 Bengals, that team started 8-0, I believe. They were a fantastic team as well. If you have a team that's performing well on the field, the content's likely going to perform well as well. It's national media picks up on it. They want to tell the story of the behemoths in the league at the time.
Mm-hmm.
When you're not having as good of a year, that's a little bit more of a challenge, because you need to share the stories that, hey, we might not be getting the results, but here's how we're getting better. Or you need to, I think one thing the Bengals did an extremely good job of with their website and content in general, they're not shy about owning up to, here are some areas that we know need to improve. They've very much run the website like a newspaper. Jeff Hobson's the writer there. He's done a fantastic job over the years. But from a content strategy side, when you're having a down year, that also gives you a chance to maybe try new things.
Mm-hmm.
You realize engagement's probably not going to be as great just by virtue of on-field performance does. In fact, it's going to play a role. And if you're having more of a down year, how can you creatively keep that fan excitement? How can you creatively show the team in maybe a different light that they can't get elsewhere? The down years were actually, for me, they were still a challenge in an exciting way.
Were there some like cool experiments looking back now and saying this is something that we just sort of tried because we had nothing better to talk about, or because we wanted to take a shot because it was one of those down years that really sticks with you? Or is it highlighting players and the great plays they're still making, or the young guys who are still getting better every day? Like, what were some of those maybe those wins that stick with you, saying, hey, this is something that I'm glad we were able to try this and it worked?
Honestly, it's developing a voice. I know that it hasn't necessarily been the strongest voice on social media. When you look now at some of the teams that have, like, I think the Chargers are fantastic. I think the Panthers are fantastic. You know their voice when you look at them. honestly, those down years, like I know there's one drive that didn't end up the way we wanted it, and I just tweeted out an emoji that was like an unimpressed face. And shortly thereafter, this is a game. It was not pretty, and something happened after that where it just was getting worse. And I just quote tweeted that emoji, and it just said update with like an even worse emoji. And that was one of our top performing posts. And I think it resonated with fans because they were all feeling it too. And it helps for them to realize, like, look, the team's not satisfied with where they're at. Yeah. And you share their frustration. And those type of things are adding a voice to your account takes time. And you need to have buy-in from a lot of people in your organization, because at the end of the day, you represent the organization and the team. And you need to just be mindful of, everyone who works there is represented by what you're putting out.
It's really well put. I think, you really do have to be able to relate to your fans, and not, it doesn't help anyone if you're trying to, to sugarcoat a situation that no one's happy with. And you ride the highs and you ride the lows, and it makes the highs feel that much more genuine and authentic when you haven't, then if you did not, point out and acknowledge the lows, because then, you can't connect that way. So I'm glad that you guys were able to be able to have that more genuine human voice and personality behind the, the posts, the tweets, the content, the social media. So I do want to briefly then transition, going from, a different voice and a different personality. With the Bengals, you were kind of there from the ground up as things were being built. And then you go to a historic, franchise like the Packers, and historic is maybe an understatement. They are one of the franchises in really pro sports all around the world that has a brand, has a large following, and sort of this culture around it. So, what was it like trying to really come in and help them, do what they're doing, but, and get better and all that, and bring your skills to the table, but also trying to learn, okay, let me try to learn about, all the history, all the personality behind this brand, and everything I can about the Packers, because the people you're talking to have lived it for generations.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, going back to the Bengals one last time here, yeah. I know I make it sound like, I don't want it to sound like it was a one-man coming in and really developing the department. That wasn't the case. Darius and I started together at the same time. Before us, there was Andy Ware, who oversaw the website. It was just really a shift in the focus to the video side of the content, the multimedia side of the content. Gotcha. That was the biggest change, was just more of a focus on building that up. There still was a department. Andy Ware, that guy, he was a machine. So shout out to him. But going to the Packers, I'm from Wisconsin originally, and obviously I went to University of Wisconsin, and I grew up cheering for the Packers. So for learning the history of the team wasn't really difficult, because I was raised on it.
Right.
I was chomping at the bit for this kind of an opportunity, and I honestly never thought there would be an opportunity to work for the Packers. It was kind of surreal that it came up. And they're very well established and very well run in this field. They have a very stellar broadcast team, and they had a social media team already as well, with Ryan Hartwig, and then a couple interns in that area, and then the digital field with Duke Bobber, really looking at the app and website and connected TV apps. It was just, that was one of the very appealing things about this opportunity as well, is I went from more of a leaner shop that was growing, and with the Bengals now, their resources are great. And I'm really excited to see what they do this next season, especially with the Joe Burrow content. Mm-hmm. But I went to this team that was established with the departments already and on a much larger scale, and seeing how to coordinate and operate there has been spectacular as well.
I know you basically, and we talked about this a little bit too, that you didn't have much of a social media training camp, so to speak. You literally showed up and it's time to go to work. So was it just a matter of picking up some of the some of the practices that they had there in place already, and making sure to earn the trust of the players, of the coaches, of the PR staff, and how was it in ingratiating yourself in a really rapid period of time?
I just kind of hit the ground running. I started the very first week of the season when we open up on that Thursday night against the Bears, and with that, the team traveled on Wednesday. So really, I had 2 days to kind of get acclimated. What really helped me though is my background with the Bengals and kind of being versatile. It really was transferable to the Packers. When I showed up, they're like, "Hey, this first game, we're going to have you focus on helping getting the highlights out real time." Mm-hmm. Great. I've been doing that and kind of just grown from there. It was baptism by fire, to say the least, but I think they did a very good job kind of preparing me for expectations. And as the season has progressed and where we're at now, really kind of growing responsibilities and helping with strategy.
And I think just to take a step back too, I mean, anyone with social media in their title and having, being a social media coordinator and throughout your career, I know you have obviously the really strong video background. You did the post-production stuff at Wisconsin and as well as with Cincy. And how has your skill set, whether it's, evolved is maybe the wrong word, but, have you found that you can focus on certain things, or, is there certain videos that, okay, I can produce this for social versus, this is a bigger video project that is, best left to our full-time production team. Like, how do you balance those day-to-day video needs for social media?
For a lot of what I'm doing now, if I want it polished, I'm going to go to the big boys in our broadcast team. They do a very good job of giving up, a clean product. And if it's something that I think is going to need more attention, I'll put it on their plate. For the most part, if I need something turned around quickly, like a highlight tape for practice or daily things like that, we had a great team this past season. Our intern Allie was good at helping getting it's more so getting the raw stuff out there, because you can get just as much, if not more, engagement from the raw stuff in real time than if you were to polish it up. And that goes back to the whole efficiency thing, effort reward. And so for the social media side, we definitely have been focused on what can we apply to keep it within brand, but also get it out there as quickly as we can, and making sure that it gets consumed as quickly as possible before other people get it out.
And I will say too, like the raw stuff, does perform very well, but you guys were able to also present that quick, raw, behind the scenes access, but still do so in a way that felt like it was thoughtful and on brand, and oftentimes, using different compositions on IG stories and playing around with different ways to present content. So it wasn't just the same old game day footage and the same old routine, which, a lot of us in sports do see a lot of times, because it's hard to present the warm up a different way every week. But how do you guys go about sort of planning? This is what a game day is going to look like, home versus away perhaps, and these are the sort of was it around using templates or just brainstorming different ways to present similar content, looking at what other teams or other sports or other brands are doing? How do you guys go about keeping that fresh feeling every Sunday?
Ryan Hartwig, the social media manager, he's very much the general of everything that happens on a game day, and we'll outline who needs to be where and when, whatever is the main focus. And we basically present, these are the must-haves, and then these are the might be happening, keep an eye out. And it just comes down to preparation. And with the IG stories, that those were the babies of Jen Fisher and Allie Pinter, our interns this past season. Allie's with the 76ers now, I believe. And they just took ownership. And I think that's another part of a successful department, is allowing people, or a successful department will allow people to take ownership of projects and give them responsibility and trust them. And Ryan's really good at putting us all in positions where we can cover everything and keep it different. And the interns were just very creative in presenting what ends up being kind of routine week after week, but like you said, present in a different light.
Thanks so much, Steven. Really good stuff. Really enjoyed. Even that excerpt was phenomenal. So is the full interview. Check out episode 173 to hear the full chat with Stephen Huddy of the Packers. Coming up here toward the end, you're going to hear next from Brent Gamble. This guy is so great to talk to. Just has so much good insight, really thoughtful with his answers. In the interview, we talked a lot about his time with SiriusXM, working in baseball with them, and helping to really turn radio into a digital and social community as well. But in this part of my chat with him, you're going to hear about NASCAR in particular, and how they work with PR, what it means to do storytelling with PR, the importance of relationships, also what it looks like preparing for a race weekend. Brent is still with NASCAR. He's only moved up. He's now Senior Director of Track Communications for NASCAR. So really good stuff. Tons of knowledge from him. So listen up for part of my chat with Brent Gamble.
Yeah, it's I'm very lucky to come to a market like Richmond because the media is so great to work with. It's a metropolitan area, but it's a 3 TV station or 4 TV stations, but 2 are the same management group or the same talent group. And one premium newspaper in town, and the paper is still the daily record essentially of what's happening in this town is still the Richmond Times-Dispatch, and it holds a lot of weight. So being able to develop those relationships and work closely with all of those media entities has been a blast. Radios is vibrant here, and it's been fun. I've always wanted to work fully on the communication side, and in my previous role at Richmond, it grew over the years to with digital, with all we did in social and the websites and the app, video production, and then of course with digital marketing over the last year and stuff as well, and creative over the last couple of years. So it was fun. I really enjoyed all that we were doing. But once we started to merge with NASCAR, there was no doubt there would be, a kind of a realignment for how we were managed and how we would work things out and do things on a day-to-day basis. And, that's what's happened. There is a digital team, there's a social, that handles the social media. There's the marketing team that handles things for the region. There's a communications team, of course, then I lead the communication side for this region. And so it's been great. I'm really proud of what we did over the years, especially with the infield redevelopment that we had for a couple years ago, and bringing back the amphitheater, and Richmond Raceway's got a complex. So on a typical year, I wouldn't count this year obviously because of COVID, but typically it's over 280 event days per year, over 200 events on property per year. So there's always something going on at Richmond and at the facility. And the operations team led by Megan Hazard's just unbelievable. And there's so many good people at Richmond, from James Hall, who led marketing and ticketing, and then all the members of my team, Brandon Brown, April Madanowski, Vaughn Crittenden, Courtney Brockwell, just absolutely fantastic people who are amazing at what they did. And I will miss working with some of those individuals who have moved to other roles and other things, but it's been a lot of fun to get to work on those things. But as we've seen and talked about the evolution of people's careers and what you do, I've always thought some of the best moments of my career were built off timing. I happened to be at XM at the same time when the baseball channel started. I happened to be there when we merged. Yep. I happened to be at XM when at Richmond when an infield redevelopment was happening, and I happened to be in the role that I am in now, right as we have merged our company, International Speedway Corporation, with NASCAR. So you just have to look at it as the opportunity for not just growth for yourself personally, but professionally, because you get the opportunity to use that network and grow your network, because now I'm spending more time with Greensboro, Raleigh, different markets that I may not have spent as much time in the past working with that local media. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know those regions much more than what I have now.
Yeah. I'm interested too, like, especially now that you are focused on communications 24/7 and in the entire region up there as well. What stories are you guys? Who's your audience ultimately? What stories are you guys looking to tell? I heard obviously there's excitement about the infield development. Is that something that you really want fans to get excited about? Is that for sponsors? Is that for potential event people that want to host events there? And then how does that relate to other stories you're looking to tell? Whether that is, talking about a specific race or a driver or teams or, and like, how do you balance all those things and what are you trying to accomplish? Who are you trying to reach?
Yeah, I think there's so much potential. I mean, I keep kidding with my colleagues that, I may be the Mid-Atlantic region, but we've got all the history. You've got three of the oldest tracks in the sport. Next year, Richmond will celebrate its 75th anniversary. Martinsville is the oldest continuous track, continuously hosting a Cup Series race. So Darlington, the oldest super speedway in existence. So there is so much history amongst these tracks that I think we can tap into and tell and share. But there's also the current day and what the racing experience is like. It's really exciting to get to be a part of it, because there's Kerry Tharp, president at Darlington, has been there for many years now. He spent a long time now in South Carolina and is known well there. Clay Campbell, of course, is a legend along with his family in the industry. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Dennis Bickmeyer at Richmond Raceway. Just all legitimately wonderful, kind, strong professionals who you get to work with on a day-to-day basis and tell the story of what's going on at their tracks in so many different ways in so many different markets. So I think the potential for what we can do and the stories we can tell is limitless as we kind of tap into it. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun in the coming years.
What does that strategy look like when there is a race weekend at one of these tracks? Do you have to there's stuff going on all year round, especially, you mentioned 280 events on a normal year at Richmond, which is insane to me. Is there additional staff? Is there sort of a game plan put in place, whether it's 90 days in advance, however long in advance, of this is what we need to execute before, during, and after the race? These are the stories that we're going to be out pitching and the angles we want to take, and how much can you really plan for versus how much do you have to just be ready to react to?
Yeah, no, I'm much more of a fan of let's be proactive as opposed to reactive, because you want to control the news cycle. You want to control what's happening. But I do think in all of our markets, you have to feed the market. If we only come to, if I only reach out to media the 2 weeks leading up to a race, then I'm not being a partner. I'm not being someone who has told our story well enough. Mm-hmm. So you really do have to map those things out. I tend to, for each race weekend, build out about a 15-week calendar of storylines, of media, and not just what we may be doing with drivers, but to try to have one touch point every single week of a story that we can touch on. And granted, right now is a unique time with transition and COVID. That's not a typical year. But that's always been kind of the way I look at it. I've got an overarching strategy that, for each marketplace that I've been working on. And, and then we work against that. But I do think you have to feed the market, and you have to look for those stories that matter. And oftentimes you may send a release that's a niche-based release. I don't like to send my releases to everybody. I want to send a release to the people I think that it matters to, because I want them, when they get it, they know that, okay, Brent thought this was important enough that he would send it to me. Not that Brent thought that, it's just another release from Brent. And that's going to happen. We're all going to get those releases. But you want to make sure that when you are reaching out, that you're sharing something that's important. But also that I'm a big fan of exclusives, that you're reaching out and talking to folks in advance, because you want that direct media placement for something that you think is a really cool story. And you also got to think about what do they need? What does the media outlet's looking for? Just because I may think this is a great story doesn't mean someone else does. And I think that's sometimes where spending 7 years at SiriusXM helps, working on the media side, because I used to be on the opposite side of all these pitches. Mm-hmm. Now I'm on the side of the pitching side. So knowing what's coming, because just because I've got a driver, that doesn't mean they want to talk to him. There's got to be a point. There's got to be a purpose, and it's got to meet the needs that their editor or their general manager, their market has an interest in, because just like us, they need clicks. They want clicks to tell that story.
No, that's well put. It's sometimes lost that both sides are trying to do their job and trying to have success as they define it. Geez, the time is flying by, Brent. But I did want to make sure I ask you one more question before we get to the cerebral stat, and I can tell that you and I can could go for another part 2 of this episode for sure. But I do want to hear, especially now with, I mean, every company is thinking of themselves as a content company. They're a media company. And how do you guys at whether, you know, at the tracks that you work at or NASCAR as a whole, or just your thoughts in general in the industry, look at this is a story that is best told by the media. Let's facilitate them telling it versus this is a story that we want to own. Let's prepare all of our content so that when the release goes out, that we already have a sweet video or a great set of graphics, whatever it may be, to support that release.
Yeah, prior to our merger, the way Richmond was structured, so I was the senior director of communications and digital, and our team was worked like an in-house agency. So if, you know, we would not only, you know, someone would have an event or something we were announcing, but we could soup to nuts handle all aspects of it, from social to website to video to creative, and make sure we could tell that whole story. And the way we're structured now is very similar to that, only with a lot more resources. You still have your in-house agencies that you're working with, and maybe working with more contractors in some places, depending on what they may be doing on the video side and stuff like that. But we're still going to be able to tell those stories. There's just a lot more resources than people to be able to do it. Whereas in the past, it may have been 5. And I think now the ability to do those things is much broader. And I think we'll be able to do it even better organizationally as we get into it. But I think that's a really unique way of looking at it, that, you know, for so many years, you know, I think when I first came to Richmond, we had hired 3 agencies, and they all had different roles. One was a media buying, one was creative, one was digital. And over time, we ended up pulling all of it in-house. We did our media buying in-house. We did our creative in-house. We did, and then digital was really where we still, you know, worked with an agency. And I think it was just a different way of doing it. It's not the right way for everybody, because you got to have the talent to do it, and you've got to have the resources and the tools. And, you know, from my agency experience, that was one of the big things I missed, was I didn't have a $100,000 tool that I could use to look for research and grab all these things. Some of the things from an agency perspective that I really did miss, you know? So I think it's still, to this day, is one of those things you kind of have to marry both things. You have your internal resources much more than you would have had in the past, but there's still a very vibrant role and need for the agency perspective to support a lot of things you may be doing.
It'll be definitely interesting to continue to watch everything happening from NASCAR Communications as this consolidation takes place, and you guys do have access to that larger pool of resources than you would have, more than you would have otherwise as an individual track. So love to hear it, love to see it, and it's only going to amplify all the other media that's going out there now. And NASCAR is definitely having a moment where it's part of the national zeitgeist, you know, more than ever perhaps, and more than has been in years. And it's great to see. The ratings are good, the racing is good. And you guys are giving us something to cheer about during a tough time.
Yeah, you know, baseball used to be it was the national pastime. It's where, you know, it led the country in social change and equality. And I think what you're seeing now, baseball's not the one leading that charge as much anymore. You're now starting to see NASCAR as a sport that is trying to step forward and have a genuine role, not only in its, you know, kind of footprint of the South, but also across the country, to say, hey, we stand for change. We stand for equality. Yeah. We're not what you may have thought we used to be. And I think when we look back at COVID years from now, you're going to look back as this was a time that NASCAR stepped forward and made a difference in social change for, you know, across the country. And I think I couldn't be more proud to be a part of this organization. And I've said this internally to some folks, you know, when I first joined, we've all had moments that, you know, that were different, not what you might have expected. But I've had those same unique moments in baseball. I had those same unique moments at other sporting events and stuff. But what is happening in the sport and the transition that's happening here is powerful. And I'm proud to wear a shirt with a NASCAR emblem now, and to see all that this sport's going to continue to do, because while they've taken the first steps for change, the action behind it is going to continue going forward. And, I think it's a bright future, and I think it's something we can all be proud of.
Really enjoy meeting Brent, learning from him, and continuing to follow along with what he's doing, the great stuff he's doing with NASCAR, which continues to flourish as an organization thanks to great people like Brent in place. We have reached the end. Last up on the Best of Digital Social Media Sports podcast. We're saving a good one for the end, though. You're going to hear from part of my chat with Kenny Pordon. He was formerly with the NFL. He was with CBS. He was also with the the second iteration of the XFL, not the latest one, but the one before that, before the pandemic. And he is now director of marketing at the Daily Racing Forum, which is a sports betting platform. With this part of my chat with Kenny, you're going to hear a bit about appreciating cross-platform things, but beyond that, with what audience are we reaching, how are they consuming on social, other channels that they're engaging with your content on. We also talk a little about how the XFL went about building its marketing strategy and what it means to develop a fan base in general. So really good stuff in this excerpt. So listen up to hear from Kenny Pordon.
You're really able now in television to get very, very granular when you look at the AVOD space. You can see how long people are watching for, how engaged they are, how many ads they look at. You can personalize ads down the road. I think that's going to be a big portion of where things go. So the more information you're able to get on a viewer, I think what's going to be interesting to see where the dollars go. Because who knows, there could be, MLB can hit a certain rating number, but maybe the NHL hits one half as strong from mass reach. But maybe their viewers are 2 times engaged. And maybe if I'm an advertiser, I'm like, well, I'd rather spend with the NHL or PGA or US Open tennis audience than with any other property because their audiences are more engaged. So I think there'll be more metrics at play as advertisers make decisions based on what sporting events they want to advertise against.
Oh, I love this stuff. I love geeking out on the sports marketing stuff. It's too much fun. But I guess tell me a little about the role you had at CBSI and then making the move to the XFL and really the impressive marketing that you guys did there in the league's short time.
No, absolutely. So for me, I was looking for potential other roles in sports, and nothing came through. So I had an amazing opportunity to join CBS Interactive, and they had 4 years beforehand started this network called CBSN, and really they were the first to jump into the AVOD space as a news network. Now, obviously, there had been CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News in the cable news space, but there had been nothing that had been a pure digital network. And CBS News obviously didn't have a kind of a cable 24/7 companion. So they thought this was a great place to go in innovation. And CBS Interactive originally started as CNET. So they were a digital first company. Digital was their DNA. So to go to a digital first, tech first, product first company as a marketer was really interesting because I had went from the NFL, as we talked about before. It was very communications driven from Pete Rozelle when he came in 1960 all the way down. Communications was really the lifeblood and driver of a lot of what the NFL did during my tenure there. Where going to CBS Interactive was all product, right? So they were looking for someone of how do you take this great product that we've just polished and made ready to bring to a broader audience and get it to that audience. So a lot of the work was working with your Roku's of the world, your Amazon Fire, and your Samsung to be able to bring in a new audience through advertising. And advertising in the OTT space is extraordinarily new. It's a very new field, and it's a great way to drive tune-in to your product, because what you're able to do is you're able to target people based on their viewing consumption habits. So what's amazing on Samsung is literally if you watch linear TV, if you were watching Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, or any news programming, I can retarget you with a CBSN ad because I can target you as a demographic. So similar to the way Facebook has been really successful as far as using demographics and segmentation, that is where OTT and where the television industry is heading in the future. So it gave us a great opportunity to, with a limited spend, be able to really target those particular users. So before I made the jump to the XFL, I was starting to kind of set a little bit of that up with our Roku barter campaign and some of our other digital partners to be able to get us primed and ready for a big spend that we were prepared to do for quarter 4 of last year.
Oh, that's super interesting. Before we go down a rabbit hole of user data, user privacy, and whether we'll end up with more targeted ads in the future and more contextual ads in the future, I want to stop. It's a fun rabbit hole to go down for sure. But I do want to hear about making the move to the XFL and really and your time spent there, and then I'd love to geek out around the football gigs for sure.
No, absolutely. So, the XFL, I had been having some preliminary conversations with them, before I even took the role at CBS, Interactive. They just weren't ready to hire what my position was, which was league marketing director. I had gotten word that they were beginning to hire that when I just started into CBSI, and I think they had some false starts there, and really the more I was kind of in the news industry, I definitely had a little bit of an itch for sports. And the XFL was one of the places that, even while at the NFL, I was really intrigued when Vince made the announcement in 2018 that he was going to bring it back, and I really thought it could work. So, naturally, just that position being out there, and my desire to get back to being in professional football was enough for me to kind of reach out and have the conversation, and from there was able to meet my eventual manager there, Scott Parker, who I learned a ton under. Worked 9 years, I believe, at Pepsi, and another 9 years at ESPN, and able to get all of that knowledge and expertise he had of marketing and be able to take that in and work with a creative director that worked a bunch of years over at Maxim and at WWE, and be able to just learn from them every day was an amazing opportunity for me, and definitely probably the best decision I made of my whole career. The amount I was able to learn in the 6 to 7 month time period is truly mind-boggling. Like, at times I'm like, wow, that was only 7 months. It feels like it was at times like 3 years. So It was just a lot to take in and pack in and learn, and really proud of what we were able to build out from a fan engagement standpoint and marketing standpoint, and just as a league in general. But for me, coming from the NFL, I always wanted to make sure what we were doing is best in class, and I could truly feel that the product that was on the field, that the whole league contributed to, and people far more talented than I am really had a huge impact on that, really made it seem best in class. So to be part of that property, I think all of us take pride in what we were able to put out there for 5 weeks.
Well, how was the infrastructure when you do compare it to the NFL? I wouldn't expect the same level of resources necessarily, but it was interesting that you were in the league office for both entities, that the NFL and the XFL, and not the team level. So you are really just focused on getting more fans more fans of the league, more fans consuming the sport, regardless of which team they are cheering for. So what was were you guys more of, we are supporting a national campaign for the league, or we are helping to seed the teams and helping their more localized marketing? Was it a combination thereof, and how does that compare, if it does, to the NFL?
It's a great question. So at the NFL, it was definitely obviously a much bigger entity. So the interaction between teams and league, it did occur. There was some good interaction between both entities, but they were a bit separate because they had established work structures, and I think there's really good work that the league's done over the last 2 to 3 years to kind of bring that a little bit more centralized and a little bit more cross collaborative. But even within the league, they're not that there's silos. I don't like using that word, but there was particular structures that were established over time, which makes sense. Like, there's different expertises that need to be done, and it is a formal entity that's been around over 100 years, so it has a way of doing things. It has a way of. The NFL it goes about its business in a similar way each year. Now, there's obviously chances for innovation. There's chances for them to change the way they do things, and you've seen that over the last 2 to 3 years on various different issues that have affected the league, and from both a business perspective and from a corporate social responsibility perspective and others. So, I feel like there's always that ability to do that. I think what was interesting about the XFL is Vince McMahon really, I think, in building this league, wanted to show the sports community that he was going to bring in the best of the best, and he really did. The executive team that he built out at the XFL was extraordinarily accomplished and really an amazing group of professionals. What was great at my end of it is that I'm a director of marketing, right? I had just been a manager at the NFL and at CBS, and that was also an interest to me to move up a level and get more experience. And I'm reporting right into a senior vice president. So a lot of structures, you don't see that in really formal leagues, where you're at a director level and you're getting to be interfacing with an executive team every day. And I learned a countless amount of knowledge about the sports business and marketing and ticket sales and business development and everything that needs to go in kind of building a league in a very short period of time, where I think because you see leagues at the NFL, NBA, NHL, and MLB are so established, a lot of times you're coming in to fill in a particular role. And there definitely is growth opportunities within those leagues, But when you're working at a place like the XFL, there's growth every day, and a lot of times it's because you're making mistakes. Like you're just running so fast that you're learning on the fly, and you're naturally getting better because you're just getting. I call them a lot of at bats. You're just getting a good amount of chances to do a lot of things, and sometimes in bigger leagues, like just because of the structure, it's a little bit more challenging to do that. So for me, in this portion of my career, I was 34 years old when I took the role. It was just the right time for me to finally get that opportunity. I had been in an established entity, like the NFL. I made the pivot to go into news and try something completely different, and then to go into a startup league. It really helped accelerate my learning over the last 2 years in a dramatic way. And I think set me up to eventually, get to another mid-senior role and then eventually get to a senior role over the next few years. So I really feel it's probably the most important move I made in my career, because it really gave me a lot of the leadership and management experience I had been craving, because I had the opportunity to interface with really successful leadership and really understand, how things are done at that level.
Hell yeah. I think anyone in this industry appreciates what you guys did at the XFL in the short period of time and the successful trajectory you guys were on prior to the pandemic. And so I definitely want to be able to state that and appreciate the great work you guys did there. And it sounds like it was great for your career as well. But I do want to jump back to the NFL and how you built up really some impressive programs there. And I know you led a lot of the fan development strategy, which, for people that aren't familiar with what that usually sometimes can refer to as, youth development, developing the fans of today as well as the fans of tomorrow, helping to grow the game, helping to grow the league, helping to grow the brand. So tell me, I guess, when you were thinking about youth programs in the NFL in particular, or fan development in general, are you targeting more? Are you trying to make the kids themselves say to their mom and dads, "Hey, let's go to the game," or "Hey, let's watch the game," or "Hey, let me try playing Pop Warner"? Or is it more the parents who are going to make those decisions? And it's probably a little bit of both. But how did you guys think about that from a marketing perspective when you're trying to grow that fan base of tomorrow?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think this is pretty similar to all sports. So I'm sure they would have a similar story, and you see a lot of the sports doing similar things. But it was really, I would guess, a three-pronged approach is the way we looked at the opportunity. And it was a lot of great work, from Dawn Hudson and Jamie West and Joanna Ferries and Marissa Fernandez as far as building the foundation of what this would be. And obviously before that, worked with Peter O'Reilly and Alex Gerson as well. And, with that team, figuring out what fan development would be at the NFL. Mm-hmm. Luckily, the league was at a point where it was at 180 million fans and really could look at the next generation of fans as a way to continue to keep the pipeline going of new fans, mm-hmm. and get them involved in the league. So the number one thing with the NFL, probably more so than the other sports, it really centers on family because it's such a Sunday-centric league. Mm-hmm. A lot of families on Sunday afternoon, it's a natural day for gathering. It's a natural day for extended family. That's how I became a fan of the Giants, in the sense that my uncles were big fans of the Giants. They would sit down and put the Giants on every single Sunday. And naturally what happens is a kid gets curious. They ask a lot of questions of their elders and of people in their family, and they learn a game through their family and then naturally become a fan. So that's the number one way that the NFL generates fans. And it's really not a lot that the NFL is doing there. It's just a natural way that the game has always been handed down to future mm-hmm. generations. So obviously, we were doing everything we could to accelerate that with messaging like football is family, et cetera, to make the family really the centerpiece of that NFL experience. Other than that, the number one thing you could do if you're trying to get a fan to be a lifelong fan is get them in the stadium as young as possible. 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, they're more likely to be a lifelong fan. Now, naturally, if you're looking at Major League Baseball, that's definitely a viable option. With the NFL, what was challenging is it's just limited inventory. Obviously, you have 2 preseason games, 8 regular season games. There's just not a great opportunity to get a lot of kids into the stadium. So what we leaned on is more, how can we go fully in on youth participation, and that was a big deal for us, meaning that how can we get as many kids to play football as possible? Mm-hmm. Obviously, tackle football, that's a parent decision, and we work with USA Football to make sure we were giving parents all the right information to make that decision that was right for them and right for their families. Mm-hmm. But we also wanted to provide alternatives within the participation landscape. So a lot of what we were doing, working with our the really smart people on our youth and high school football team like Tara Holloway and Roman Oben, was to figure out how do we build out this flag football universe? How do we get more girls involved in the game? How do we get kids that might not consider tackle football at a 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old age range to start playing football at a younger age, both through spring flag football and fall. So a lot of that was through building out the NFL flag program, using tentpole events like Pro Bowl to do that, but also in just supporting the overall flag football ecosystem as well. So that was another thing that we looked at. And then finally was partnerships with Best in Class, whether it be having our Pro Bowl on ABC and Disney XD and getting in front of the youth audience with a fun product, or really we partnered extensively for basically all 11 years I was there with Nickelodeon around Super Bowl, which is obviously a key time period to bring in a lot of casual fans and a lot of kids that the only football game they might watch all year is the Super Bowl. How do we make that experience with Nickelodeon and some of the programming we were doing with them to get kids to be more curious about the NFL, watch the Super Bowl with maybe a little bit more knowledge than years past, and then want to watch more football heading into the next season. So that was always a key partnership for us as well. So that's really the way we looked at it. And naturally, what I think Johanna, Marissa, and the team did a really good job of is let's assess each year of, are we spending our resources in the most valuable way? Are we really doing the best we can to continue to drive engagement among this youth fan base? And are we doing the best that we can do as far as our investments to do that? So we were always rigorously, yearly looking at how we're spending our dollars and how we're getting to the best possible place with our youth fans. So I feel really proud of what we were able to build during my tenure there, and a lot of the programs, whether it be play football or the relationship with Nickelodeon, obviously are still in existence at the NFL and still continuing to grow with the smart leadership that's handling those programs now. So I definitely feel appreciative that I had the opportunity over 6 years to be part of that story and part of growing that fan base.
Thanks so much again to Kenny. Recommend that full episode. That's episode 175. Just like going to school about sports marketing and fan development. Really good stuff there, and continue to track what he's doing with the Daily Racing Form. But that'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the best of version and found some good ones to listen to in full. You can always scroll back through the full catalog. There's so many good interviews over the years. I'm so lucky and so fortunate to be able to do this, to learn from these really insightful, smart, articulate, generous people to give us their time and their knowledge. But this is Neil Horowitz. You can find me on Twitter, NJH287. I am your host. As always, I would love to hear from you. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, where I post more content. The website for the pod is dsmsports.net. And, of course, you can follow along with the podcast and a new episode coming to you soon on the website, dsmsports.net, and also your preferred podcast platform. Until next time, this is Neil Horowitz signing off with the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.